for me, I just love that I get to, get involved with strategy. I get involved with, finance, with marketing.
Have a great interview lined up for you today. I am speaking with Joseph Lyons, who is the Environmental Operations Coordinator for Susgrainable. If you haven't heard of Susgrainable, they are doing some really cool stuff, like upcycling spent grains that would have been disposed of by breweries into home bakery mixes, like banana bread, chocolate chip cookies, and even pancake mix. So I got to make sure that I get my hands on that and give it a try. The company was started by Mark Wandler and Clinton Bishop, and their mission is to create a world where food waste and diabetes are a thing of the past, which I think sounds like a pretty good world. Joseph is fairly new out of graduation, but he has done a lot since he started at Susgrainable. In just 9 months, he has helped build tools to track stock, built relationship with industry partners, and he has even laid down the company's groundwork for ERP. If you don't know what that is, don't worry. I didn't know what it was either, but we're going to cover that in this episode. So let's turn it over to the interview.
Well, I work at Susgrainable, and I'm the operations coordinator or environmental operations coordinator for the company. So we're a circular economy focused upcycling startup. We take beer waste, or brewers spent grain is the technical term, from craft breweries. And we turn that into an upcycled barley flour that's super nutritious and has a lot of really awesome use cases. My job is, again, being operations coordinator. I work under our COO, whose name is Clinton, and the operations team at Susgrainable is essentially me and him. So, under his leadership and also working with him, I manage Susgrainable's end-to-end supply chain. So procurement to distribution, also managing production relationships, sourcing. I'm also managing a number of our tech related projects and sustainability related projects. And because it's startup world, you put on a number of hats. I'm also helping with business development on tech and on the development of investor like reading material and things like that.
That is way more than I expected when I asked that question. I was expecting just more focus on the supply chain, but that's an amazing role. You're quite new out of school, I would say ish. So to be able to do an opportunity like this, that's amazing.
Yeah, it's this kind of role. I graduated last year and I was taking a bit of a break, and sort of over that time thinking about what kind of work I wanted my first job out of school to be. I had done a number of like very corporate internships while I was in school, and it's sort of it all I enjoyed a lot of it, but I came out of it sort of with more questions than answers, which I think is how things go. Yeah, I don't know. One thing led to another. I interviewed for a job that made me realize the kind of role I wanted. And then this Susgrainable opportunity came up. You mentioned earlier in the intro that I had done podcasts before, and I had interviewed our CEO, Mark, through that podcast. Because of that, we were connected on LinkedIn. He was hiring for this operations coordinator, and it was like exactly the kind of role I wanted from like this current phase of my career. So I just messaged him, led to an interview with him and our marketing coordinator, led to an interview with our COO, and yeah, here we are.
Wow, that's amazing. You're quite fortunate. For a lot of people, it's really hard to find that first role out of school. They can apply for so many jobs. I've heard, I know someone recently, and they kind of just take what they can get at that point. Like, I know there's different opportunities, but it's nice that you're able to find something that has impact for you, and you have so many things to explore as you're doing this role.
Yeah, no, very much. I'm like one of my favorite things about the role is just how much I get to do. I really don't like getting siloed into one menial job or one specific function. And so for me, I just love that I get to, get involved with strategy. I get involved with, finance, with marketing. And, what you mentioned about the job market right now. Yeah, like I really commiserate with, new grads this year, especially. Even for myself last year, the job market was not at all what I was expecting it to be or hoping it to be. And so, yeah, I mean, it really forced me to, yeah, on one hand, be open to possibilities, but also it made me like think about what I really wanted from my career from this like next phase. And yeah, you're also right. I was like very lucky to land this job.
Well, let's talk more about the job. So we talk about supply chain, and for a lot of people, they don't even know what supply chain is. It's just like I know, I think a lot of us got a taste of it maybe during COVID when we realized, oh, the world stopped. I can't get what I want immediately. But there's a lot more to the supply chain than just that portion. So, could we talk a little bit more about your role and how that relates to the supply chain and maybe even what supply chain is?
Oh gosh, yeah. What is supply chain? I think it's I describe it as just the it's the interconnected web of stuff and people and money and data that's the, underlying us getting all of the things we need and use that companies need and use to be businesses so they can provide things for other people to use. I know that's a really high level description, but that's at least how I see it. And I also see it as, it's like it's never ending. I don't see it as like, it's just raw material to an item is consumed. And in one way that is when we live in like a very linear, like
Mhm.
you know, make to waste model. But, I think data flows and things like that always come back and, give us information that we can use to improve our supply chains and how businesses operate and things like that. So it's a ongoing process. How that works for Susgrainable is we're a startup with a very interesting sort of place in the, and we can frame supply chain in any number of ways, but let's talk about it for the barley supply chain or value
Okay.
chain. We can use whichever term. So barley, for us, like barley goes through the beer route. So virgin barley will get grown somewhere in Canada on the West Coast where I am. It's usually in like Alberta. It'll then get malted. The malt house, it'll go to breweries, industrial or craft. Let's use craft breweries for now. Craft breweries will use virgin barley. They'll steep it in water and equipment that's called a mash tun, and that steeped water will go on to become beer. And that brewed boiled barley is to the brewery at that point it's waste. There's no use cases for it to them. So one way that's used now is it's often sent to farms to supplement animals like livestock feed.
Okay.
That's a good use case. Otherwise, it goes to landfill, which then creates its own CO2 emissions. We're in the process of working with UBC. They have a new climate center to try and understand what's the net environmental savings of this whole barley waste management problem from breweries. But in any case, what we do is we take that barley and we like I said, we dehydrate it, we mill it, and we turn it into this upcycled barley flour that's super nutritious. I think we can boast like 4 times the fiber, 3 times the protein of like a conventional barley flour. Huge reduction in net carbs. So it's a pretty good option for diabetics.
So that's the product that you're using. So you're finding a new use case for something that is has a lot of nutrients and such, but it normally would just go to feed. So you are taking this and you're making it into a more valuable product. So how does your role play in with that?
I mentioned I was on the operations team, and I think the simplest way I can describe it is I just help operationalize that, making sure that our flour is, it comes into our hands and we can, at this point right now, our main revenue generator is a line of CPG products that you might have seen from our website. We have a line of 3 baking mixes at the moment, and they're very tasty. So a big part of my job is you know, classic supply chain management activities. It's inventory management, making sure we have appropriate stock levels pending demand, demand and supply planning. So making sure we're able to coordinate production along with, when we anticipate sale of product, especially through e-commerce or through our distributors, which go onto our retail locations. I think we're in 72 stores. So that's a big part of my job right now. We're also in the process of launching a new product, which is a snack pretzel that incorporates our upcycled barley flour. That one is a challenge because we're launching it on a completely new supply chain.
Wow.
As a business, we're moving to Alberta from BC. So we're trying to make Alberta our sort of strategic headquarters. There's a number of reasons for that. Our founders are from Alberta, number one. So they're Alberta natives. So it's closer to home for them. But also we've gotten a lot of support from the government of Alberta in terms of, setting us up as a business and, knowledge sharing for, resources. So they've been really helpful to us. It's also just in a more practical sense, real estate is cheaper in Alberta. So a big thing we're trying to do now is setting up our first upcycling facility. And that, we'd identified Vancouver initially as the first, location to open our first upcycling facility. I think just cost prohibitiveness has been sending us to Alberta. So yeah, it's all good. But anyways, we're moving our operations to Alberta. We're trying to figure out, production partners, logistics partners, warehousing partners, and also just ways to procure flour in order to make this pretzel product a reality. We've identified this as a really strategic product for us. Baking mixes, they're very tasty, but it's kind of a slow-moving product category. And so for Susgrainable to achieve our revenue and profit goals, we needed a product that has higher margins, lower cost to produce. We're able to push more volume in more stores. We needed a more attractive product. And we also wanted a mechanism to build relationships with our brewery partners. And we had just identified this snack pretzel as the best way to, kill all birds with one stone.
It sounds like a perfect match as well, because I don't drink, but I know that pretzels pair very nicely with beer. And I guess that makes sense with you're using the product from there. So that taste profile is going to be very similar.
Yeah. So that's exactly right. Like you hit the nail on the head. I mean, I think one of our dreams is to be able to create, these pretzels and be like, hey, so these pretzels came from your waste, and I think that's a really good way to, like I said, build relationships with breweries, but it's also great for our brewery partners who are as sustainability focused as we are. I can't remember the exact stat for this spent grain related waste for breweries, but it is quite significant in terms of waste output, but also cost. And so we're able to alleviate a problem for our brewery partners. And, as a result, we're also able to create a product that's, it's tasty and it can be complementary to our breweries products. So.
And I could imagine moving as well to Alberta, like you mentioned, that's where your breweries are. So you're helping to close that gap in terms of transportation, because I can imagine it's very heavy and it's a perishable item. So the closer if you can close that gap, that will really help with the process overall.
Yeah, no, totally. So that logistics component is also really important for us. We're trying to expand on this micro facility model. So our goal is to have a micro facility for upcycling spent grain in every urban location that's a market fit in Canada. And that's a really cool business model, but in a practical sense, it's because spent grain, when it comes out of breweries, it's very highly perishable. It has a shelf life of 8 hours.
Oh my gosh,
the reason
that's short.
when we take it from our breweries, we're taking it right as they're doing the brewing process. And when it comes out, that spent grain is it's wet and it's hot and it's prime breeding ground for bacteria if the conditions are not met. And if we're not monitoring the conditions, then it's a huge food safety risk. And especially for a company our size, we a food safety incident is like a company killer. And so that's
Yeah.
hugely important for us to make sure that this spent grain, I mean, we can turn it into something really cool, but for us to do that, we need to make sure that we're, meeting all food safety requirements. And yeah, another reason I'm mentioning that is it just shortens the travel distance, or the distance that spent grain can travel from the brewery to this facility where it's processed.
That makes sense. Wow, it's amazing how much waste is coming from these breweries, and you don't really think about how something so nutritional, it's almost seems like it's backwards, where I'm imagining, for example, with cheese making, the pull out water with the whey that got used as a waste product that can be used in like protein powders and such, but the main product is the cheese. But it almost feels like the opposite, where with the beer case, it should be the spent grains that are the main product, because that's where all the protein, fiber, and nutrition is coming from, and the beer is almost like the offset.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's a really good point. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know like how many historic use cases there have been for that spent grain. But yeah, it's that water, it's like steeped full of sugar. You throw hops and yeast in it, that becomes beer. And then the grain, I think, is as far as I know, has usually just been waste. I think things like nut milks that waste, like the okara, can you can bake with that. It's a little harder with spent grain for beer. I understand. And so I think that's just a reason for us to innovate on how are we collecting and processing that spent grain so we can turn it into something that's it's waste, but we're able to reintegrate it into human diets.
Hmm. Well, one thing that also stood out to me was that you mentioned about how fast these items perish. They're very perishable with such a short span. How do you actually coordinate this whole process? Because it sounds like you have such a short window. I'm assuming you have like a lot of computer tools. I know that in one of the posts that you posted on LinkedIn, and I have no clue if this is even related, is that you helped implement an ERP system. So I don't know if that's related. But how do you manage all of this?
Yeah. So this is a bit of a tricky answer, because there's the answer I'd like to give you, and in this like theoretical answer, and then there's the answer that's the reality now, and how Susgrainable operates. So I feel like I've given you a lot of lore and background, and I know that it seems like they're roundabout answers to your question, so I apologize for that, but I think the lore is somewhat necessary. So the lore here is that we're currently in the fundraising stage, like where our founders are fundraising or raising funds so that we can acquire and build our first upcycling facility in Alberta. And this facility is what would enable us to process spent grain into flour ourselves. So right now we are actually outsourcing the spent grain production, flour production. And so our production partner, they're the ones who are sourcing the grain from breweries. They have the technical capabilities to do what we do. So as it stands, the relationship is, yeah, we procure our core product from this production partner. The ERP was one of the main projects I was hired for. And that's something that we were able to do a significant legwork, identifying user requirements within Susgrainable for an ERP system, which, by the way, for your audience, is enterprise resource planning. It's basically, let's, how do I explain it? It's like a one-stop shop for data within a company, and you can like connect all of your like organizational functions, sales, accounting, inventory management, production, marketing. They're all included on one platform, which is great, where the same data feeds are going everywhere, so it's just all very easy to manage, and that's again the idea behind it. Like I said, one of the projects I was hired and onboarded to work on and lead for Susgrainable, we saw some timeline delays in like the facility acquisition. So while I thought we were going to like go straight into an implementation, that just ended up not being the case. So where we're at with ERP is we've done significant legwork. We've identified an implementation partner. But the next step for us is acquiring this facility. And so that's our biggest organizational strategic goal right now. But yeah, I mean, I can just tell you though, in that like theoretical stage when we're procuring, we're sourcing the spent grain ourselves from our brewery partners, we're managing our own production in our own facility. Yeah, that like communication and data component will be so important. Um, we've identified the need for, you know, like temperature tracking, um, the spent grain in sort of specific vats so that we're ensuring or that we're tracking differences in temperature in case of a food safety incident. The production component for ERP is really paramount so that because we need to be able to lot code. So if there's a contamination, we need to be able to track where this potentially contaminated flour went, whether it went to an enterprise customer or whether it went on to like be included in food products. So this technology is really important for that.
This is really good to know because I'm learning a lot because I think when I think of just data, I think, okay, it's the computer science majors that are doing it and they're analyzing the data and they're doing something behind the scenes. But this is really good to know that, um, companies of all sizes need to be able to analyze their data. They need to be able to pick it up. And, you know, I'm learning now that I didn't put it two and two together that supply chain needs data and those two complement each other. So that could be a profession that if someone wants to go into that, maybe that might be the area.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. No, I think if and I think nowadays for most like corporate professions, data analytics plays some role, whether
Yeah,
you're in
that's true.
like, marketing or finance or anything. But I think supply chain as well, definitely. And I think there are, a lot of different roles you can, play in this like supply chain function. I do like everything, all the functions because I'm at such a small company, but I have friends who are at larger organizations who their specialty is inventory management or their specialty is supply planning. You can put a lot more your data brain into that.
Mhm.
It's all personal preference, but yeah.
That makes sense. But I mean, a lot of food companies, we do think of these large corporations, but I know I think Ontario, I think 95% of operations are under 100 people. So it's actually more likely that you'd be doing a role maybe similar to yours, I mean, you're a startup, so there's very, very small role, but number of people. But um, it's more likely you'll be taking on many hats and using data in different ways. But again, I never thought about it. How did you find out about? Because my understanding is that you went into supply chain management right after high school. Or am I wrong with this? Or I'm just like,
No,
how did you
that's
find out about this?
no. So wow, I think technically you're right. Um no, wow, you've done your research on me.
I
Um,
try.
no, I mean I only found out about this term supply chain management in my first year at in university. So I, if we rewind the clock a little, I went into I did commerce at UBC, Sauder School of Business. I went to business school thinking I wanted to become a lawyer. I was really interested in uh, sort of understanding like the economic components behind, why do people, do what they do and how does that, relate to like
Mhm.
justice, criminal justice. In hindsight, that is not the move. If you want to study that, you go take economics, you go take sociology. I don't know what I was thinking, but anyways, I went to business school thinking I wanted to go to law school, got my first grades back and realized I'm not getting into law school. This is not my path. So I had to sort of find a pivot somehow. We had a class called Com 101, you know,
Mhm.
when in my first year, that was the first class you took in first year, covering all the fundamentals of business. My TA for that class, a woman named Queenie Tran, part of this program called Global Supply Chain and Logistics Management. And so I'd heard a lot about this program where you get to travel to Denmark, you get to travel to China, study with a cohort of students from those countries, study at those universities. And that was really attractive to me. But I was still, that was at the same time as I'd been ruling out, like, okay, do I want to go into finance? No. Do I want to go into accounting? No. Things like that. And this program of global supply chain and logistics management just stuck out. I talked to a man named David Gillen, who is the professor leading the program. Such a lovely guy, and I loved chatting with him. And it was just, yeah, this program just really spoke to me, and that's how I got into it. Yeah.
Well, okay. Because I was thinking like you're in high school and you're like, I'm going to do supply chain management.
Oh God, no. When I was in high school, I my job in high school was working at a distribution center in Vancouver for FedEx. So I helped move boxes. I helped wash trucks. Um, I incorporate that into like my interview story now, where I like, when I'm applying to jobs. Not that I'm applying to jobs now.
I know what you mean.
Get that out to my bosses in case they're listening. Like for my Susgrainable interview, like I talked about how my career in supply chain started like when I was in high school already, and I just didn't know. Um, and yeah, I mean, after that, though, no, I really didn't know going into university that this idea of this supply chain management was a thing. But it just ended up really like, resonating with me from a business function point of view, from a sustainability and like social impact point of view. It all just sort of lined up. And so I went full send with it, and I haven't looked back. I really sort of loved what I studied, and would love to sort of keep doing this kind of work going forward in some capacity or another.
What part about it is the thing that you love about supply chain management? Because on paper, it doesn't sound like the most exciting thing. I'm
No, no,
we
totally fair. It's not for everyone. I think finance is more glamorous, marketing is more fun,
yeah, exactly.
appearance. I think for me, I, I've I think I've tried to psychoanalyze myself a little with this question as well. But I think the best answer I can come up with is it's I've just been really drawn to like understanding how things work, and I think supply chains are the literal embodiment of how things work, how things get done in an organization that operate on a physical product or a physical commodity. And so that, I've also just, I love supply chain diagrams, like drawing out like this is the start and end of a product, and its supply chain for a company. That's really like fun for me. So I don't know. It's just like I really love that it's a profession where it forces you to see the bigger picture, and because there's a deeper underlying sort of currents to that too. Like, you draw out a supply chain that's driven also by macroeconomics. It's driven also by politics, and regulations at the national, international, municipal, provincial levels. So it's all, you know, I guess the TLDR, it's how do companies operate, a physical supply chain, and it's how do economics and politics play into that, and the law.
I like that. It feels like a giant puzzle, and it sounds like you're trying to figure out, well, how do I put the pieces together to get the full picture, but get things from okay, maybe that's more like a maze, but
No,
it feels,
it's a maze, it's a puzzle, and it's I realized this as we were, figuring out our like pretzel supply chain for Susgrainable. It's a headache, but it's a good headache. Yeah.
yeah, especially when in a way, I bet it can make it more difficult, but it almost makes it a little easier because Susgrainable is so focused on that sustainability aspect, that circular, the circular economy. Yeah, is that the right one?
Yeah.
That you can almost start to figure out who you're going to procure from because you have more of these structured. Okay, well, we can't go with these because they don't meet our criteria or something like that.
Yeah. Well, I think theoretically, I'd agree with you. But the
Okay.
biggest challenges we're facing right now, and so let me elaborate on theoretically. We would very much like to become a B Corp, like a B corporation, and that's something we foresee a little bit further down the line, just because of those stringent requirements related to like how do we evaluate suppliers and things
Hmm.
like that. Where we're at as a business right now, I think the biggest challenge when it comes to procurement is finding suppliers, period, finding production partners, period.
Oh,
Some of the things we're trying to do are like quite niche. So, or actually, let me take that back. Um, it's been hard to find a production partner for pretzels, for like snack pretzel crackers. Um, because a lot of the pretzel manufacturers in Canada are like large corporations, think Rolled Gold, think
right.
Snack Factory. We're like we just don't have the same production resources, capital resources that these guys do. And so we need to outsource this production. Well, there aren't that many commercial kitchens out there that have capabilities to for this specific product. And so we already know that if we want to actually realize this pretzel, we need to be working closely with uh, production partners who don't quite have those capabilities, but figuring out like working with them, like to working with potential production partners to figure out how do we get this pretzel how we need it to be. And so we already know that the challenge is like it's not about finding the right suppliers, it's about finding suppliers, period, and working very closely with them to sort of achieve the specifications we need.
Okay. Okay. That makes a little bit more sense,
Yeah.
especially okay. Okay.
Let's take a quick break and hear a word from our partners at Careers Now. In this conversation with Joseph, we heard about how Susgrainable is trying to make a change in the industry. You too can make an impact by upskilling yourself with Careers Now Job Ready Skills Training. It is a free online training program made up of 14 proven courses that are perfect for individuals looking for a job immediately or for students preparing to start their career. Check out careersnow.ca for more information on how you can create a free online account. Okay, let's get back into the episode.
Um, as well, like another thought that comes up, we talked about the data earlier, but then it's like, you also have to be able to communicate properly with this type of role
Yeah.
because you need to be very clear about, well, these are the capability, or this is what we're looking for. How do we find the right person to do this? And then getting on the phone with them, actually having these conversations, seeing what's happening, like that also takes a whole nother skill set.
Yeah, it's I think where we're at right now, it's a lot of like I think relationships building skills are really important. How we do business, and how I see our bosses do business, like our founders, and something I really respect. I think they really embody this rising tide lifts all boats mentality when it comes to like building business relationships. I mean, and I saw this when we were just starting chatting with potential brewery partners in Calgary. There was a kind of an indirect competitor who had really strong ties with these breweries, and she was a lady who um, takes spent grain and for animal feed, as I mentioned. And so our bosses were, very, eager and excited to chat with this lady to build this relationship um, with her to, come up with an arrangement that works for everyone. uh, you know, let's get, there's an abundance of spent grain. We're not going to need all of it. Let's, we'll take some, you take some, let's figure out how to do that. And I think that was like a very inspiring moment for me personally. And I think that's the energy we bring to our smaller, like, supply agreements, procurement agreements, things like that. And yeah, it's really exciting to see. I'm like learning a lot about, like supplier relationship building and negotiation from our COO. Um, it's a really fun time. It sounds and seems intimidating, but if you treat it as if you treat it as organic, it's very organic. It's very positive.
I like that. I'm just thinking about these conversations and then I'm like, okay, I got to go listen to some more of the podcasts that had Mark on them because I bet to get that full story, because that is the type of impression that I've gotten from the conversations that I have heard. It is about building up everyone because and I think you put it really well, is that there's more spent grain than you need right now. So why not bring everyone up? So I really like that sentiment. And I think it goes to show that there's a lot of different types of companies out there. And to find one that you have the opportunity to find one that can match your values. So you can keep looking, and I think that's a really good opportunity for podcasts and all these types of, conversations that hopefully by listening to them, you can realize, oh, that might be a or that might be a company that's more well suited for me. Or, oh, I never even knew that that could be an aspect of somewhere that I could work. Okay, now I have that knowledge. I'm going to maybe look for something like that. So it's amazing how many different types of companies there are, and there's good people behind them trying to make a change and make a good working environment, but then also have a profitable business, like doing them simultaneously.
No, I agree 100%. There are companies who, will, talk about ESG and talk about doing good in name, but they're, employing God knows what kinds of business practices. And so it's, really refreshing to be working with leaders who do embody those values that they talk about, lifting up their people, about lifting up communities, who are serious about the vision that they believe in. So yeah, it's been really refreshing, really positive working at Susgrainable. I mean, I talk to friends who have had bad experiences with an employer, and it's sort of really disrupted, how they think about their career. And I try and tell them that, like, it doesn't have to be as bad as you think. Like, you don't have to subject yourself to hell just because you want to do marketing, or this doesn't mean that marketing is this terrible function necessarily. I think if you're with the right organization, with the right leaders who understand, what the fundamentals of this, like, business function are, you can end up with a really empowering and really positive sort of work that you can sort of be excited waking up for.
Mm-hmm. It sounds like you have been this workplace has been well for you, and you have been learning a lot, and you have leaders that support you and such. And it makes me think about the current phase that you're in. We've talked a lot about what you've done in the past, but I'd love to just talk about what you're looking to learn right now. Are there any skills? Is there any topics that you're currently like really interested in, or you're trying to actively improve?
Oh gosh, that's a really good question.
I
Um,
know I threw that out on you.
no, it's a really good question. What am I trying to improve right now? I'm trying to put on more of a biz dev hat as of late.
Okay.
And there's a reason for this, and it's because I'm helping our leadership with some of our investor facing material right now, specifically slide decks. I love building slide decks. It's a lot of fun for me, but it's an opportunity to really put myself in the shoes of an investor and try and think, what are the questions that an investor is going to have looking at this, and what information can we provide, and how can we orient that information so that it, like, instantly absolves or resolves any kind of doubt or questioning that a potential investor has. And in doing so, I'm also working a lot with our finance intern, Ella. She's an intern in name, but I think she's already just brought a lot of, like, expertise and energy to the team. And I'm learning a lot from her about finance. How do you do a discounted cash flow? What does that mean in terms of, like, the valuation of a business? You know, um, so yeah, I'm working very closely with her, folks on our marketing team, to sort of do all of this changes to our investor material. And I
What
think,
is a discounted? Oh, sorry, I was like, what
what
is
is a
a discounted?
discounted cash flow
Yeah,
model?
I don't even know what that
Oh
is.
God, not I'm
Okay, wrong
just
question.
wrong question, wrong question.
Okay. Okay, we'll
I mean,
push it aside.
it's the kind of thing you learn about in business school, and unless
Okay.
you're in finance, you say that's cool, cool that's the thing. But actually, this is actually also just sort of highlights. I'm trying to learn more about the finance stuff.
Yes.
Discounted cash flow, I could not give you a good explanation, but it's like, finance and accounting has always been a weak spot for me. It's been something that's always intimidated me. Even though it's not all that scary when you think about it. I like to be analytical, and this is just a different kind of analyticalness. So yeah,
That's
something
true.
I'm trying to learn.
Yeah, that's a really good start. I know I'm like, here's what you're learning. So let's ask you even more about what you're not sure about. But I
Okay.
feel you with the financial side. It feels like a whole different world. And like, they're still using analytical techniques. They're still using data to a certain extent. Like it just feels like it's a whole different world to me. But especially I have to learn more about the investment side as well, because that's like you hear a lot about in the news about this investment, or you watch CBC Dragon's Den and you see about the investment. And sometimes when you're a technical person, like when you're in the sciences, you're just like, that's someone else's job to figure out. And it kind of is, but really you should know some of it yourself, because that funding is what's getting you paid. So maybe by you having some more knowledge about it, maybe you can also help get some more of that funding.
Yeah, no, agreed. I think I don't know if you would agree with this, but if, as you're doing your PhD, you might encounter like, and please correct me if I'm wrong, like, do you encounter situations where you have to like pitch the value of like, this research you're doing, or this like resource you need,
Yeah, we
you have to
do.
explain the return on it. I think that's
Yeah,
the fundamental though. So
that's
I
true.
think you're already kind of understanding that. So I think this is just like an extrapolation of that. It's just, it's just math. And if you're on Excel, you just learn the movements kind of thing, I think.
That's true. Yeah, that is true, because there's always like when you're saying with PhD, when you apply for scholarships, or even when you go into this program, you have to have a proposal out. You have to say it's going to take this. We might not put numbers as much to it, but we're basically asking for money to say like, okay, I need this much in order to fulfill this project, and I think it's going to take this many years. And I guess it's that same kind of principle as well as investment. It's like, why is the value that I'm providing, if you invest in me, going to, um, if you invest in me, this is the knowledge or the, yeah, well, I'm thinking PhD. This is the type of knowledge that we can use that could apply to industry. So I
Yeah.
guess, yeah, it's not a far jump.
I mean, I think so I guess, I'm not an expert on this. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think like there's a lot of like overlap in terms of like the skills between like being in a more like pure business role versus being on the technical side and like being in academia. It seems like to me.
You know, I think it depends.
Oh,
I think it depends on the role that you're doing, because some technical people, that's all they do, like they really hyper focus. But once you start to be like a manager maybe within the department, then you start to take on that business side, and then you get the project management side. So maybe if you're not maybe in the very beginning, if you're just the okay, how do I want to say this? If you're doing the pure researcher, maybe you get protected by it. But once you start to move up into like a management position or anything that's more than what you're doing, then I think that's when you start to think about what we were saying with the business side, the financial, the like I think about our postdocs. They're the ones ordering the things. They're the ones making sure that the costs are within a line. So I guess it can. Huh, that's a good way to look at it.
yeah, it's a PhD is something I had been passively interested in like as of late. So that's why I was just wondering
Okay.
how you view it.
Well, we can always talk off camera about that if you ever need any questions, but
Yeah.
I'm not trying to take you away from your work. um, with that being said, because I know we're getting close to the end of our conversation, and I just always like to ask my guests before I let go, is I like to ask for advice. I know we've touched upon a lot of things about how you got into your role, what you're doing to improve, but we never really talked about towards our audience. And I like to ask you is, what advice would you give to maybe recent graduates or young professionals that are thinking about entering into the food industry, maybe more specifically into supply chain management? So I'll leave it to you. You can go very specific to supply chain management or just general life advice.
Ooh, yeah, good question. When it comes to food supply chains, you're going to encounter a lot of constraints um, due to like perishability, and due to like how fragile a food product might be. That's going to impact things you might not even think about, like how do you package your product to be transported? How do you transport your product? Um, and as in like literally what kind of transportation will it go through, but also how far, it affects
Mhm.
distance, it affects um, compliance if you're traveling across borders. There's a lot of challenges to that. If those are the kinds of headaches that interest you, then I highly encourage you to like apply to like a supply chain focused role in the food industry. You're going to have these kinds of headaches in any other industry, whether you're in like apparel or, in a more transportation focused role. There will be headaches. Work in supply chain management if you like an occasional headache. If that's and let me frame headaches as like puzzles or as mazes. If you like the headache of a maze and the satisfaction of solving a puzzle or a maze, this is the job function for you. Um, and as for food, I don't know if I have much to say. Food is, I think it's unlike you, Veronica. I think it's something that I fell into with Susgrainable. Really had been a big fan of Susgrainable's mission for a long time. And I was like, that's a company I would like to work for. It's something I felt way back in like my first year. And so it just happened that I fell into food and started learning about food. I don't have the same like inherent passion for food that you do. So you might be able to speak a little better on it, having heard what I have said. But yeah, I don't know. My advice is more at a general level, but
I think that's still good. I think, and it goes to show, and that's what this podcast is here, that you'll have so many people that are super passionate that know exactly what they want to do and like they're gonna go for it. They've loved food because their grandmother had a farm in Jamaica with her grandfather. Like I've known some people and she's wanted to do that ever since she was in high school. And then you have other people that, you were in a club meeting and someone had like a really cool thing that they just mentioned in conversation, or you just kind of got the job because it was the one that you applied for. And then it just led you into this whole field. So there's a lot of different walks of life. And that's kind of what you need from people. Like that's how we move. And like you mentioned with your high school, you're working at FedEx and you never really know where that was going to lead. So there's all different walks of life. And I think that's okay.
yeah, real.
So with that being said, the last question I am going to ask you though is if people had questions for you, where could we find you?
You 100% are welcome to find me on LinkedIn. My name is Joseph Lyons. I should say there. You can find me at Susgrainable. Um, and anyone who has, interested to chat, I'm like really eager to chat with people who are like interested in learning about stuff. So, yeah, feel free to reach
Perfect.
out.
Thank you so much, Joseph, for coming on the show. I've learned, like I said, I wanted to learn more about supply chain, and I have learned. So thanks so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, no, thanks for inviting me. It's been, yeah, really nice to talk about Sustainable, talk about my job, and talk about supply chains. I can do this quite often, quite a lot. So, yeah.
Thank you everyone for staying until the end here. I hope you learned a lot about supply chain management, but also about Joseph. He was easy to talk to, and I learned a lot about supply chain management. And I really hope for the success of Susgrainable because they're doing really cool things. I'm always someone who's up for upcycling. If you are listening to this on the audio feed, then I just want to let you know that we do have these podcasts as videos over on our YouTube channel. So go check that out. I'll make sure to link that. As always, thank you everyone so much for listening, and I will see you next time.